While the term super team has become more and more relevant as NBA history has progressed, today we are talking about the exact opposite. NBA legends who have played with some of the worst supporting casts in history. Arguably the luckiest moment in the history of the Chicago Bulls franchise was Michael Jordan sliding to them with the 3rd overall pick in the 1984 NBA draft. Had scouts at the time known half the player that Jordan would actually become, there is a strong chance that no one would have let him slide past the 1st overall pick. Jordan would spend 13 of his 15 years in the NBA playing for the team, and in that time, he won the 1984-85 Rookie of the Year award, made 14 All-Star teams, 11 All-NBA teams, 9 All-Defensive teams, won 6 NBA titles, 6 Finals MVP awards, 5 MVP awards, led the league in scoring 10 times, and led the NBA in steals 3 times. However, before Jordan was able to achieve any of this success, he had to suffer playing alongside one of the worst and most dysfunctional teams in NBA history. The Bulls were so notorious for their below league standard behavior at the time that they earned the nickname the Traveling Cocaine Circus. Even with some of his team playing on illicit drugs, Jordan was still able to drag the roster to a 38-44 record and would even make an appearance in the postseason. But sadly, they were bounced in the first round by the Milwaukee Bucks in just 4 games. The subpar roster consisted of Michael Jordan, Orlando Woolridge, Quinton Dailey, Dave Corzine, Dave Greenwood, Steve Johnson, Caldwell Jones, Ennis Watley, Wes Matthews, Jawan Oldham, Sidney Green, Rod Higgins, Charles Jones, and Chris Engler. When talking about the roster that surrounded him in his rookie year after the closure of his time in the league, Jordan was quoted as saying, "Preseason, I think we were in Peoria. I was in the hotel. So I'm trying to find my teammates. So I start knocking on the door and I hear someone say, shh, 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 someone's outside. And then you hear a deep voice that says, who is it? I say, MJ? And then they all say, F. He's just a rookie. Don't worry about it. So they open up the door. I walk in and practically the whole team was in there. And it was like things I've never seen in my life. You know, as a young kid, you got your lines over here. You got your weed smokers over here. You got your women over here. So the first thing I said was, look, man, I'm out. Because all I could think about is if they come in and raid this place right about now, I am just as guilty as everybody else in that room. And from that point on, I was more or less on my own. I just enjoyed hanging out, playing cards, and watching movies. You know, I wasn't going to clubs, I don't smoke, I don't do lines, I didn't drink at the time. I was just looking to get some results, get up, and go play. Luckily for Jordan, the Bulls, and the NBA as a whole, he would not fall into the same habits as his teammates and saw the effect that it had on their gameplay. While it took some time for the Bulls front office to put together enough pieces to give Jordan the ability to compete for titles, once they had an elite core around him, they became arguably the greatest dynasty in NBA history. If it hadn't been for Jordan developing into arguably the greatest player of all time, there is a solid chance that the league would never have been able to survive a post-Larry Bird and Magic Johnson era. Around this time, the league had a reputation of having low-character athletes who were more interested in fighting and doing drugs rather than competing for championships. As we now know today, MJ would become the most marketable player in NBA history, and the whole world was in love with him and the Bulls, effectively saving the NBA and setting the groundwork for it to be the league that we follow today. Up next is another player in the greatest player of all time conversation that had to go through a rough stretch of surrounding cast to open up their NBA career. LeBron James is one of the greatest players that the NBA has ever seen, and he's heading into his 21st season in the league and is still among the top players that the league has to offer up to this point. Throughout his highly decorated career, James has won the 2003-2004 Rookie of the Year award, made 19 All-Star appearances, 19 appearances on the All-NBA team, 6 appearances on the All-Defensive team, won 4 NBA titles, 4 Finals MVP awards, 4 MVPs, led the league in scoring once, and led the league in assists once. Coming into the league, James was the most hyped up prospect of all time. Even in recent years, with scouts and fans around the world being in love with prospects like Zion Williamson and Victor Wembanyama, it could still be argued that there was much more hype for James coming out of high school. Before he was even old enough to attend college, James's games were being nationally broadcasted on ESPN, and analysts were reporting that if he did not finish as a first ballot Hall of Famer, he would have been thought of as a bust. However, the pressure being built on by the media would not be helped by his teammates on the Cleveland Cavaliers in his rookie season. Before James had even suited up for his first NBA game and got the chance to share the court with his new teammates, they were already against him. In a now notorious interview, Carlos Boozer was quoted as saying, "We have better players than him at his position already on our team." Sky's the limit for him though. Fellow Cavaliers teammate Ricky Davis was quoted as saying, "LeBron is going to add to what we need and just make things a little easier." While this was nowhere near as negative as some of his other teammates, this was still not the most encouraging thing for a rookie James to hear. Arguably, the teammate with the coldest take from this interview came from Darius Miles when he said, "I don't think you can just bring a high school player in and really just think your team is going to turn around like that. If he comes, he can just hop on our bandwagon, and hopefully we can do something big." Despite his teammates being skeptical about how much of an impact James would make on the team, he made it clear in his rookie year that he was more than capable of leading the roster. James would finish the season leading the Cavs in points, assists, and steals. While the Cavs fell short of making the playoffs this season, finishing with a record of 35-47, James would still prove that he had what it took to carry a roster this early in his career and won the Rookie of the Year award as well. This roster consisted of LeBron James, Carlos Boozer, Zydrunas Ilgauskas, Ricky Davis, Jeff McInnes, Eric Williams, Darius Miles, Lee Nalen, Chris Mim, Tony Battle, Kendrick Brown, Kevin Ollie, Ira Newble, Mateen Cleaves, J.R. Bremer, Jason Capono, Sagna Diop, Bruno Sundov, Michael Stewart, and Jelani McCoy. While James would not publicly voice any gripes that he had with this roster during his time with the Cavs, in 2022, he would finally speak on the lack of help that the Cavs front office was able to surround him with during his first stint with the team. He was quoted as saying, "I don't know, I was 18 years old saving a franchise, so I don't understand." Many took this as a dig at his former team, and even if it was the case, it was kind of deserved. During his first stint with the team, it could be argued that the most talented piece that the Cavs were able to add alongside LeBron that was already not a member of the team when he was drafted was a far past his prime Shaquille O'Neal. What if I told you the next NBA legend on this list would lose 2 future Hall of Famers from his team in only 1 season? Despite playing through the 1960s and ending his 14-year career in the early 70s, Oscar Robertson is still regarded as one of the most talented point guards to ever play the game. During his lengthy career in the league, Robertson won the 1960-61 Rookie of the Year award, made 12 All-Star games, 11 appearances on All-NBA teams, won an MVP award, and took home the 1971 NBA title as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks. During the early stretch of his career, Robertson would be surrounded by an extremely talented core on the Cincinnati Royals. Despite the level of talent that the roster featured, they would be unable to bring home an NBA title. At its peak, the team featured Robertson, Wayne Embry, Jerry Lucas, and Jack Twyman. However, after the 1965-66 season, the Royals would lose both Embry and Twyman, leaving just Robertson and Lucas to try to bring the franchise a championship. They would suffer a steep drop-off in terms of regular season wins with the huge hits to the roster. Cincinnati would finish the regular season with a record of 39-42. Despite finishing the regular season with a losing record, the Royals would still make the postseason where they were bounced in 4 games by the Philadelphia 76ers. The roster would feature Robertson, Lucas, Adrian Smith, Happy Hairston, Connie Dirkling, John McLaughlin, Bob Love, Flynn Robertson, Walt Wesley, Freddie Lewis, George Wilson, Len Chappell, and Jim Ware. Up next is a legend that had to play with a supporting cast that was so bad it led him to request a trade from one of the most highly decorated franchises in NBA history. You cannot tell the story of the Los Angeles Lakers without a fair chunk being about Kobe Bryant and vice versa. Being a Laker was a major part of Kobe Bryant's identity in the NBA. Bryant is arguably the best player to ever suit up for the franchise, and he carried the team through almost the entirety of his 20 years in the NBA. During his incredible 2-decade-long career, Bryant would make 18 All-Star appearances, 15 appearances on the All-NBA team, 12 appearances on the All-Defensive team, won 5 NBA titles, 2 Finals MVP awards, the 2007-2008 MVP award, and led the league in scoring 2 times. However, in the 2007 offseason, it appeared that Bryant would end his stint with the Lakers much earlier than he actually did. After a depressing surrounding cast in the 2006-07 season, Bryant would request a trade from the team. When making the request official in an appearance on the Stephen A. Smith show, Bryant was quoted as saying, "When it all happened back then, I just assumed it was just the media rolling with it. Despite people telling me that the Lakers were kind of having me take a bullet for this, I tried to turn a deaf ear to that. I just re-signed, I wanted to be positive, and I had no evidence to the contrary. When I heard this Laker insider trying to throw me out saying I'm responsible for it, I'm not going to take that. I'm not going to settle for that. I had to step up and voice my opinion and let people know what actually went down. Later on in the interview, Bryant would make it clear that he intended on being traded to the Chicago Bulls. However, as we know, the Lakers were able to resolve the issue and get back in Kobe's good graces. With how strongly Bryant made it clear that he was not going to be a part of a rebuild, it raises the question of just how bad his supporting cast was in the 2006-07 season. The team finished with a regular season record of 42-40 and made the postseason. However, they would be eliminated in just 5 games in the first round by the Phoenix Suns. The roster would include Bryant, Lamar Odom, Smush Parker, Kwame Brown, Maurice Evans, Andrew Bynum, Vladimir Radmanovich, Brian Cook, Jordan Farmar, Ronnie Turiaf, Aaron McKee, Sasa Vujacic, and Shammond Williams. In the following season, the Lakers were able to add an elite Hall of Fame caliber second option to place beside Kobe in Pau Gasol. The two would mesh incredibly well on and off the court and would lead the Lakers to 2 NBA titles. Up next is one of the greatest big men of all time, having to deal with one of the weakest supporting casts of all time. Hakeem Olajuwon was one of the greatest big men that the game has ever seen. He retired after 18 years in the NBA with 12 All-Star appearances, 12 All-NBA appearances, 9 appearances on all defensive teams, won 2 NBA titles, 2 Finals MVP awards, the 1993-94 MVP award, 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, led the league in rebounds 2 times, and led the league in blocks 3 times. If the Rockets had been able to surround Olajuwon with more better-fitting talent on their roster, there is a solid chance that he would have retired with a couple more rings and could have even taken down Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in the NBA Finals possibly. In the 1988-89 season, the Rockets roster took a big hit after the team moved on from Ralph Sampson. When the two shared the court together, Olajuwon and Sampson were one of the toughest frontcourt duos to score on in the history of the NBA. In their first season without Sampson, Hakeem was able to lead the team to a 45-37 record. However, they were bounced in the first round by the Seattle Supersonics in just 4 games. The roster included Olajuwon, Otis Thorpe, Sleepy Floyd, Mike Woodson, Buck Johnson, Derek Chivas, Walter Berry, Purvis Short, Tim McCormick, Frank Johnson, Alan Levell, Tony Brown, and Chuck Nevitt. While the Rockets front office would eventually be able to surround Hakeem with some Hall of Fame caliber teammates, it would come when the players were well past their prime and were unable to play a major role on a contending team. Despite this, he was still able to establish himself as one of the best at his position and lead the Rockets to 2 hard-fought championships. Now, if you guys made it this far into the video, please drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. It would really help me out, and let me know what I should make a video on next.